So,
you.
can you tell us about the books you've written? And I have all four of them here, and why you decided to write about, just any the specific wolves that you chose. So,
Sure. Well, the first wolf that I got to know really well here was Wolf 8. And the first book, The Rise of Wolf 8, is his story. And he had a very difficult life when he was young. He was the runt of his litter. He looked different from his three brothers. They had beautiful black coats, and he had a very dull grayish coat. He kind of looked like a coyote. And if you're a wolf, you don't want to look like a coyote. That's a bad
yeah.
thing. Um, his mother was whitish, his father was jet black, so he just didn't fit in. And he was bullied and pushed around and beaten up by his three bigger brothers. So he was like a kid in a neighborhood or school that was bullied quite a lot. But when he got a little bit older, he really came into himself. And there's a great story in the book about when he was out just exploring with two of his brothers. One of his brothers stole a elk calf that a grizzly had just killed, and the bear chased the three brothers and was about to get the brother that had the calf. And little eight was the brother, despite the fact that he was the smallest, that stopped and stood up to the grizzly bear. And he actually caused the grizzly bear to stop and turn around and go home. So he protected the two brothers that had been bullying him, but they hadn't seen that because they were running away. I was the only one that saw that. And that was the first indication I had that this guy, I think, when he grows up, is going to be a pretty special wolf.
Hmm.
And I think I already might have mentioned it in passing that he was the wolf that set the first example that we ever documented of adopting pups that were not his own and raised them.
Hmm.
So he was the wolf that found the family where the father wolf had been shot and killed. So it was just the mother wolf and the eight pups. He came along and he immediately was drawn to the pups. He played with them. He shared some food with them. He probably didn't realize it that, but from a distance, the mother wolf was watching him. And probably at first she was scared to see the stranger approaching her pups, but she was desperate to have a new male come into the family as her mate and as the alpha male. And I'm sure when she saw him treating her pup so kindly, that was the thing that convinced her that this was the guy. So even though he was very young, maybe the equivalent in human years to a teenage boy that was maybe 14 or 15 years old, suddenly he was this big shot alpha male and he became one of our greatest. And so he raised those adopted pups to adulthood, trained them, and then, of course, raised many pups that he sired himself. And then one of those pups that he adopted was to grow up to become also one of our greatest wolves. That was Wolf 21. So he's the main character in the next book, The Reign of 21. Um, he had a very close relationship with his adopted father, with Wolf 8, and they became close friends, close buddies. Eventually, 21 grew to be much bigger and stronger than his adopted father, but he was always very willing to have number 8 as the leader of the pack and as the highest ranking male. But when 21 was a young adult, it was time for him to leave home and set out in the world. And he had great timing. He found another pack, the Druid Peak pack, where their alpha male had just died. And so when he showed up, the adult females in the family and the young pups, they desperately needed a new male in their family, and he came along at the perfect time. So he showed up and he was invited to join them, and he spent the rest of his life in that family. And that was the first time I was really able to see close up, as I studied them, the relationship between him and his long time mate, Wolf 42. And they were made for each other. It was our greatest love story, and they were inseparable. Eventually, she became the leader of the pack, the alpha female. And I think we have already mentioned that the alpha female runs the show, not the alpha male. And 21 was totally okay with that. And so she made all the big decisions. He was in charge of going out on hunts and feeding the family and protecting the family. And they lived a long, long life together. The average age of wolves here is really only about 3 or 4 years, but both of them lived to be 9 years old. And I don't want to spoil what happens at the end of the story of 21 and 42, but when they were very, very old and been together for many, many years, he didn't know exactly what had happened to her, but um, as far as he knew, she disappeared, she got lost, and he deteriorated very, very quickly. He basically fell apart after he lost her. And he did something very, very sentimental, very, very affectionate, very touching at the very end of his life. And I think for all of us here that knew those two wolves, it was the most emotional event that we've ever had here. I I remember that one day I was telling that story to a woman friend of mine, and when I told her what 21 had done at the very end regarding his lost love, she just started to sob
I know
and
you're
cry
making me want to cry right
uncontrollably.
now.
Yes. And well, me too. And being a guy, you may know that we can't handle it if we think we've made a woman cry. So I was saying, what did I do wrong? What did I say? And it took her several minutes to finally say, why can't I find a man like 21?
Oh, make me cry. Okay.
And that says it all.
You keep doing that, right? Yeah, because I read that story.
He was I guess I've never thought about it in these terms, so I'll say this for the first time. He was the world's greatest boyfriend. Yeah. And then in contrast, there was the world's worst boyfriend. And that is the main character of the third book, The Redemption of Wolf 302. So 302 was 21's nephew, and they were total opposites. So you could not rely on 302 for anything. He was a total mess up. And but he was very good looking, and the girl wolves would forgive him anything. Um, but just to condense his story to a huge degree, the reason why there's a whole book about his life story is when he became an old guy, he totally turned his life around, totally turned his life around. So to being the most irresponsible male wolf we've ever had, um, he became a wolf very much like his uncle 21. And the story of his last day of life is one of how he became one of our absolute greatest heroes. And then the fourth book, the Alpha Female book, is different. A female is the main character, our greatest female wolf, the '06 female. And there's so much to say about her. She was like a Disney princess in that she was the most beautiful wolf that we've ever had. And the males just lined up to court her. They all wanted to be with her. And she just rejected them left and right. And finally, when she was middle aged and we thought she would never settle down, no male would ever be good enough for her, she picked two brothers that were less than half her age. And we just could not figure out what she saw in them because they were inexperienced. They didn't seem to have anything going for them. But she knew what she was doing. And the story in that book is how she and those two brothers, how she trained them and educated them, and how when she was in a crisis, when it looked like she and her pups were about to be killed by a rival pack, um, that's when it was proven that she picked exactly the right guys. They became two of our greatest heroes in how they saved '06 and her pups that year. So that's their story, along with hers.
Yeah, fantastic books. I was going to ask you a question just about the colors. I mean, you see the different colors of their coats, I
Mhm.
mean, so if
Yes.
I don't know if you one, just tell us a little bit about that. I'm just curious of what you're,
Sure,
see.
sure. Yeah, we can talk about that. So, here in Yellowstone, about half of our wolves are black and the other half are gray. And there's different advantages depending on what color you're born. But because each color has certain advantages over time, it tends to be 50-50. And we've also found that whether you're a male or a female, you tend to pick a mate that's the opposite of you. So, for example, the '06 female was gray, and when she picked her two boyfriends, they were both black.
Oh, wow.
Um, so that would mean that the pups have the advantages of having the good things from one parent that's gray and good things from the other parent that's black. Um, and we can talk more about that, but that's just kind of the main story of the wolves here. They're black and gray. And then, like humans, if you have black fur, guess what? If you're a black wolf, you tend to get gray as you get older.
Yeah.
The gray wolves stay gray, so they don't have to worry about that.
So out of your books or what you've written right now, which is your favorite wolf? I mean, that's kind of a tough question to ask. Probably I shouldn't ask that
Yeah,
question.
it'd be like asking a parent who's your favorite child.
Yeah.
Well, uh, boy, there's so much to say about Wolf 8 because he was a true underdog that became such a huge success. And there's so much to say about 302 because he was such a bad boy for so much of his life and he totally turned around. And '06 was such a great heroine. She has such an exciting life story. But I guess I have to go back to 21 and 42. It's partly because it's a love story, but partly because each one of them in their own way was such a special wolf. We didn't talk about the fact that 42 had an evil sister. That
Oh,
was number 40, who was very, very aggressive. She drove her own mother out of the family. She drove a sister out of the family, and then was trying to get rid of 42. So 42 really had a hard time growing up. She was beaten up and bullied a lot. And unfortunately, even though 21 was our heavyweight champion, he had a policy of never doing anything that might harm a female. That was just forbidden for him. So he was kind of helpless in figuring out how he could be on 42's side and help her with this. So I'll just give you kind of the bare bones of what happened is that we realized that 42 had a very, very high level of intelligence. And we saw over time, she put together an alliance of younger females in the sense that she did favors for them, she helped them. And so eventually, when we had the final confrontation between the two sisters, the good sister 42 and the bad sister 40, and it looked like it was going to be to the death. And we knew that 40 was just stronger and willing to use any violence to achieve a victory, that it was very likely that she would kill 42. We didn't actually see what would happen, but we pieced it together kind of like a detective story. We think that as they were having it out, and probably 42 was losing badly and just about to be killed, that those younger females that she had helped and been on their side for the previous years, they ran in and intervened on the side of their friend, 42. And that's what made the difference,
wow.
that she had treated those others so well that they were willing to help her out when she was about to be killed. So the end result of all of that was that 40, the bad sister, she died of the injuries inflicted on her in that fight. And then maybe the best part of 42's story is that that was the denning season. Um, that she went over to her sister's den, and we were concerned that because of all the bad history between them, she would kill her sister's pups so that none of them would grow up to be like their mother. But we eventually proved that she did exactly the opposite thing. She took mercy on them And not only did she raise her own pups that year, but she raised her sister's pups as well.
Wow. What amazing stories. So there's good and evil, even in like wolf packs. That's interesting, you know.
Well, that's why we say that there are no two species on Earth that are so similar to wolves and human beings.
Wow. Huh.
So I hear that once in a while women have bad boyfriends, and in the wolf world that was 302, and then sometimes they get to have a good boyfriend, and that's Wolf 21.
Yeah, yeah. I'm only so lucky, right?